Dust shimmered above the desert track, miraging sky into glass. A lone woman pushed a wooden cart, creaking with tin canteens and a split-lip barrel. Her palms bled, but she kept walking. Water was life here, and selling life kept her own heart beating one more dusk. She had no place to go, only a line of landmarks etched behind her eyes. The broken windmill, the sycamore bleached bone, the distant mesa that stayed blue even at noon. Each evening she camped beside the road, trading ladles for coins, promises, or silence. Nobody ever asked her name. Fewer still offered theirs. That morning the sun rose violent and white. Heat pressed the land flat, scaring even the buzzards high. She set a crate upside down, balanced a chipped enamel sign, water 3 cents, and waited. Hours crawled. A freighter wagon rattled past without slowing. 2 soldiers galloped by, their canteens sloshing full, laughter scattering dust. She watched them fade, feeling smaller than the nail heads in her shoes. When the stranger appeared, the horizon looked empty, so she thought a mirage. He rode a dun gelding whose ribs shadowed its hide. The man wore no badge or bandana, only a sweat-dark coat fastened at the throat. He dismounted stiffly, boots sinking half a print into powder. He did not speak. Instead, he lifted a silver dollar, more than a week of sales, and placed it on her crate. Then he waited with open hands. She filled a tin cup and set it beside the dollar. He drank slow. Steam rose off his cheeks. When the cup emptied, she refilled it without being asked. On the third pour, he returned the cup, but pushed the dollar back too. A quiet trade, water for nothing or maybe everything. Wind shifted. Thunderheads bruised the far rim of sky. She eyed them, counting heartbeats between flash and rumble. The stranger secured his saddle but stayed on foot, leading the gelding beneath her patch of canvas shade. He tied the reins, then knelt and began tightening the loose wheel bolts on her cart with a stubby wrench he carried in a pocket. Metal groaned, iron filing the silence. She wanted to speak, to thank, to question, but voice felt risky, like stepping on ice too thin. Instead, she slid a carved peach pit into his palm, a tiny bird with folded wings, a token she kept for luck. His thumb brushed the carving once. Then he tucked it inside his coat. Storm wind arrived tasting of iron. Sand hissed across the road. She closed canvas flaps around the barrel. He lifted the cart's rear handle and nodded toward a stand of dwarf cedars farther upslope. Together they pushed until trunks broke the gale. There, beneath resin scent, they waited. Lightning stitched the openness beyond, white thread on gray cloth. Rain came sudden and hard, drumming leaves, filling her cracked tin basins. She set every canteen open-mouthed to the sky, catching wealth. The stranger propped his coat above 2 more, using himself as roof. Water pooled at his collar. He did not flinch. Hours later, clouds unraveled into stars. The world smelled newborn. She poured fresh rain into the barrel, watching moonlight follow each ripple. The stranger watered his gelding, then began to leave. He pressed the silver dollar onto the cart once more, but this time his other hand lingered, offering the wrench, a silent promise that he would be back for it. She nodded. He turned north, leading the horse, coat dripping, silhouette sharp against starlit sand. When he was gone, she sat on the ground, dollar in fist, heartbeat hammering louder than the storm had. She did not know his name, yet the road ahead felt suddenly shorter, as if a signpost had risen unseen, pointing home. Sleep was shallow, stitched by thunder echoes. In dreams, she was again 8 years old, cupping runoff from the orphanage roof, learning that water could taste of rust and sky at once. She woke before dawn, throat raw, fingers still curved. The fire had died to a single coal. Over it she warmed a pebble and pressed the heat against her sternum, counting breaths until tremors calmed. She never carried mirrors. The last time she saw her own face was in a blacksmith's trough 3 months past, cheekbones sharper, hair shorn uneven beneath a man's hat. She kept the hat because it shaded the memory of long braids cut off her coin. Those braids had bought her first set of canteens. A priest called it unbecoming. She called it survival. The storm left new tracks written on the land. Deep hoof prints pooled with silver, cedar needles matted into arrows. She followed one to where the stranger had stood. A fragment of his coat lining, torn on a juniper hook, fluttered like a half-caught promise. She folded it inside a ledger where she kept tallies of miles and gallons. Page after page, all columns empty under destination. By mid-morning riders returned. A family wagon, mother feverish, children silent with cracked lips. She charged nothing. Instead, she ladled rain into their bucket until sparks of hope lit the children's eyes. The father offered a bridle in payment. She refused, but he left it anyway and whispered, "May your road narrow." In desert tongue that was blessing. When heat crested, she poured a cup for herself. She tasted thunder still drifting on the rim. Far downslope, dust plumes marked cavalry drills or cattle drives. She imagined a stranger among them, coat-patched, silver dollars spent on nails or oats. Perhaps he had no name either, only errands, evening folded shadows long as fences. She oiled the wheel bolts he had tightened, marveling how the cart moved smoother now, like a lung ease of fluid. She caught herself smiling, an expression in use so long it cracked. She touched the fissure gently, as if it might bleed. Stars bloomed earlier than usual. Clean air will do that. She traced constellations with the wrench tip, drawing invisible loops from her heart to the horizon. Somewhere out there, he walked. She wondered if he remembered the carved bird. Before sleep, she added a new line beneath destination. A single initial she imagined belonged to him. She did not close the ledger, leaving the page open to the moon. At dawn, a faint shape approached through mirage. Horse and man, yes, but different horse, stronger, saddlebags bulging. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her stance, feet planted, eyes steady. The stranger stopped 10 paces away, removed his hat, and set it brim up on earth. Inside lay 4 small sacks of seed and a rusted tin plaque, reading Mallister Ranch, EST 1849. He pointed to the cart, then to the horizon where mountains breathed blue haze. His gesture painted a map. Fields where water could be worth more than coins, where roots might drink and hold. She traced the air back toward herself. Question clear. He nodded once, slow as sunrise. She let out a breath she hadn't noticed holding. Then she lifted the silver dollar, still warm from her pocket, and placed it inside his hat, an answer rendered in metal. Together, they began transferring canteens into the saddlebags, balancing weight, planning without words. When the first load was secure, he handed her a folded strip of rawhide. On it, burned into flesh, one word, Hawthorne. She ran fingertips over the letters, tasting their shape as though spoken. His name? A place? Perhaps both. She looked up, but he was already adjusting stirrups, leaving interpretation hers to keep. As they set off side by side, cart wheels whispering, hooves drumming, a line of quail scurried between sagebrush, mother leading chicks across perilous openness. The woman smiled again, the fissure healing into something stronger. Not yet family, but direction. Ahead lay land soaked in storm memory, waiting for seed and a name newer than thirst. Night caught them midway up the wash. They camped where a petrified log bridged 2 boulders, a natural roof. He gathered sage limbs, she struck flint. Spark met tinder, circle of light grew. She poured a single cup, shared between them, each sip returning sky inside the other's reflection so. No vows spoken, yet a chord sealed in quieter language, shared breath above the same flame. When embers cooled, she traced a small crescent in dust beside his boot, marking the moon's phase. Tomorrow it would swell. Sun scalded the ridge, etching their shadows long. 2 figures moving as one across ground still steaming from night rain. Dry dawn painted the basin pale gold, the air newly rinsed. The woman walked beside her cart, matching each creak with a steady press of palm. The man, Hawthorne, as the rawhide strip declared, rode a bay mare he had bartered for the exhausted gelding before sunrise. Ahead, a jagged ridge clawed north. Beyond it, rumor promised high grasslands where storms lingered and soil remembered water. The climb forced silence into sharper relief. Boots scraping slate, wheels biting gravel, lungs drawing the same slow rhythm. Several times Hawthorne dismounted, shoulder to shoulder with her, pushing until the axles groaned but obeyed. Effort stitched another unseen thread between them. From the summit of plateau unfurled, green by desert standards, a quilt of bunchgrass and rabbit brush stitched along a dry creek scar. In the creek bed lay the brittle ribs of an abandoned wagon and, half buried, a weather-pocked sign, Mallister Ranch, 8 miles. The arrow's tip had long eroded, pointing everywhere and nowhere. They halted. Hawthorne rested a hand on the sign, then on the cart handle, a mute question. Shall we follow? She nudged the wheel forward. Dust lifted, decision made. Late light slanted through willow skeletons when they found the ranch. It was less homestead than memory. Cedar planks sagging, porch half-collapsed, corrals choked with tumbleweed. A warped arch still read Mallister, though the final are hung by one nail, twitching like a hesitant goodbye. Hawthorne opened the crooked gate with reverence, and the cart rolled easier, as if the ground recognized purpose. Inside the barn they discovered rusted tack, a broken grindstone, 3 nests of owls blinking at daylight. Sun shafts fell through roof holes, painting dust in drifting gold. She emptied 2 canteens into a trough. The mare shivered with gratitude. Hawthorne hung his rawhide nameplate on a nail above the stall, a claim of space without claim of ownership. The woman circled the yard, gauging what might be saved. Split rain barrels, a plow missing one handle, hinges still firm on the smokehouse door, her palm against each surface. She listened for the slow heartbeat of wood. Places, she thought, remember kindness too. They camped beneath the porch overhang. Hawthorne coaxed flame from cedar curls in an old brick hearth while she unpacked seeds, millet, sorghum, barley, grains hardy enough to challenge poor soil. Under starlight, they sorted kernels into neat piles. When she caught a splinter, he removed it with tweezers found in a tack box and wrapped her thumb with cloth torn from his sleeve. He said nothing, yet the gesture spoke. Your pain is safe here. Morning brought work. They hauled fallen beams, cleared weeds choking the corral, wired the pump handle until, after hours of grit, water rose cool and mineral sweet. She laughed, too loud, too sudden, and clapped a wet palm to Hawthorne's shoulder. Surprise flickered like dawn behind hills, then settled into a rare half-smile. They tilled a patch near the creek scar. Each turn of soil unearthed relics, a porcelain doll hand, a bullet casing mother-of-pearl buttons. She laid them on a plank altar beside the well, honoring those who once called this valley home. By late afternoon, clouds stacked again. Hawthorne measured distance with his eyes, fetched tar paper, and together they hammered across roof gaps until rain hammered tin instead of floorboards, channeling clean water into barrels. Every drop felt like old coin repaid. That night, he slid the silver dollar toward her. On its face, he had scratched a thin groove dividing eagle from stars. He placed a nail beside it, then drove a nail through coin into a porch post, an anchor no flood could wash away. She traced its cold rim. Here began something that could not be spent. Days lengthened into a steady cadence of repair. Fence post reset, rust sanded from tools, barley shoots rising waist-high. Their only audience, a red fox at dawn and ravens whenever Hawthorne hammered iron on a makeshift anvil. On the 7th evening a rider appeared, a circuit preacher with a coffin lashed crosswise to his mule. He needed water and ground enough to read last rites over the nameless bones inside. The woman offered drink. Hawthorne alone carried the weight to the lone cottonwood and set it down with care. Under lantern glow the preacher's eyes lingered on tidy rows of barley and the woman's cart, now half empty, half promise. He asked if the pair were wed. She bowed her head, unsure. Hawthorne met the question with a glance that refused definition. The preacher nodded, spoke shorter verses, and left before dawn. They buried the bones beneath a cairn of creek stones. The woman placed the doll hand atop, fingers forever reaching. Hawthorne laid the nail-scarred dollar on the tiny palm, a toll for the road beyond, then turned away as if done tallying debts to the dead. Summer matured. Rain retreated. Cracks spider across the field. The pump wheezed sand. Coyotes prowled nearer. On the 13th rainless morning the fox lay dead by the well, ribs caved by hunger. Resolve felt thin as parchment. She rose before first light, strapped empty barrels to cart, and faced the south road toward the spring she once sold cup by cup. Hawthorne stepped in front of the mule traces, and shook his head. He pointed west, toward hills dark with cloud shadow, unknown but alive. She touched the silver dollar sunk in the porch post. Its edge seemed warmer, urging courage. She nodded. They set out together, cart behind, horizon ahead, trail sharp with uncertainty. Sun rose copper over the mesas as the pair pressed north again, water sloshing in barrels strapped tight. Grass brushed ankles, silver streaks drying fast. Hawthorne rode the bay mare bearing sacks of seed, while the woman guided the cart, feeling every axle tap like a heartbeat. Clouds sprinted west, shadows shattered, and a tang of smoke drifted that was too deliberate for wildfire. They slipped into a shallow draw, hid beneath cottonwood, heard four riders test the ruts, then canter on. Dust was the only witness. By noon, heat pulsed through air like a forge bellow. They halted beside a vein of chalk rock and unpacked a strip of tarp to cast thin shade. The woman soaked a rag and pressed it to the mare's muzzle, remembering how animals trust quiet hands before they trust grain. Hawthorne sorted river stones he'd gathered, choosing 2 flat ovals. With a nail, he scratched shallow channels and positioned them under the cart axle where friction bit hardest. Grease was low, but rock dust mixed with oil would buy another league of travel. Travel resumed and the land tilted upward. Wind funneled between basalt walls, scattering pinwheels of grit that stung eyes raw. Hawthorne walked ahead now, reins looped over shoulder, testing each rise with his weight before allowing wheels to follow. Twice he paused, head cocked, listening to echoes intersecting. A subtle geometry revealing whether the gorge bent or split. The woman watched his concentration and wondered what maps lived behind those silent eyes. A relay station materialized toward dusk. 2 adobe rooms, corral gate gaping at sky, trough dry as bone. Bullet holes peppered the door like clustered stars. Inside the storage room, bats scrawled circles around a shattered lantern. A calendar on the wall still clung to a month 5 years gone. Luca, the boy who would soon find them, was not yet part of the picture. But fate already brewed between cracked bricks. They found a hidden well behind the station when Hawthorne noticed willows growing unnaturally green despite drought. Beneath tangled roots, a fissure yawned. He lowered a pebble. 3 heartbeats later came a splash faint yet promising. They improvised a bucket from a broken helmet, rigged leather cinches as rope. Water surface clear, cold, tasting of lime. They filled every barrel, every skin, even soaked cloths for the mare's legs. Evening came lavender, hills violet, the world briefly forgiving. They camped inside the corral, patching a single gate plank so breeze would not bang it through night. Over a cooking fire they heated barley, added a sliver of jerky Hawthorne had saved since the first storm. The woman spoke barely above crackle. Storm smells different when land is ready. It was the longest sentence she had given him. He nodded toward the sky where faint sheet lightning blinked like the eye of some patient god. A figure watched from the loft of the relay roof, unseen, a hungry orphan named Luca, whose life had narrowed to the cadence of his own ribs and the echo of marauders who burned his previous camp. He saw the traveler's patience with animal and land. Something unlatched inside him. Pre-dawn torches later proved that marauders tracked Luca's stolen crumbs. A rifle cracked. Splinters flew. Hawthorne angled the woman behind the cart, flung a barrel over a torch to smother flame. Lantern oil erupted but died under flood of water meant for crops. The woman swung a shovel shaft, felt bone crunch, smelled cedar smoke mixing with blood. The assailants fled at first light, leaving 1 boot, 3 spent shells, and Luca curled in a canvas roll near the hearth, knife still clutched but heart surrendered to safety. Morning unfolded slow as a hymn. Hawthorne whittled planks to board the shot window. The woman made coffee thinner than memory, but hot enough to chase shock from Luca's hands. The boy stared at steam twisting upward, then quietly offered his name. She nodded and poured half her cup into his tin. A contract inkless yet unbreakable. Journey continued with Luca riding the mare bareback, learning balance by gripping mane not saddle. He asked few questions. Instead, he observed how the woman timed her breast to the cart's squeaks, how Hawthorne read the land as though every stone carried scripture. By afternoon, he mirrored their rhythms. They reached the ranch at sundown. First thing Luca did was circle the ruined arch, touch the dangling R, and declare it sad. At supper, he found an old music box in the barn loft. Its cylinder was dented, tune distorted, but he repaired the spring and coaxed out a crooked waltz. The melody drifted through rafters while bats spiraled overhead, and for a moment childhood felt possible again. Workdays blurred warm and relentless. Hawthorne forged iron stakes from scrap rail, driving them at compass points. The woman gathered sage branches, wove them between stakes so wind sang, but dust slowed. Luca learned knots, roof slat spacing, the weight of a hammerhead. Each evening they carved notches in the porch post. First for the woman, then Hawthorne, then Luca. The nail-scarred silver dollar shone above them like a low-hanging moon. Yet the riders returned, scouting. Hawthorne saw fresh droppings, felt cut fence wire. One morning Luca was gone. Track south led into the basalt pass. Panic rose like sandstorm. The harmonica he prized lay dented in dust. Silent accusation. Hawthorne and the woman saddled at once. Rifles left behind. They trusted clothes-work tools more. Inside the pass echoes layered. Voices of bandits bartering over a bound boy bounced off stone. Hawthorne moved like a shadow, stake in fist. The woman timed her charge with falling gravel. A tent pole collapsed under Hawthorne's blow. Gunfire ricocheted. Stone dust stung eyes. Luca rolled clear, caught an abandoned rifle, and held it steady though he fired no shot. Bandits broke, slipping into cracks of canyon that swallowed them. They led 2 surrendered mules home, tethering them beside the mare. Luca said little, but that night he hammered the missing hour back onto the gate with more care than strength. Wheat bowed under a bronze sun and rose newly hoed. Stew thickened with potatoes, as laughter returned tentative but real. Luca carved a bird from driftwood, wings spread, and placed it beside the first bird of folded wings on the cart. Past and present perched together. Rumor began to ride wind. Drought-starved crowds heading north, contested deeds, big ranch syndicates buying water rights with bullets. The valley felt like a drumhead waiting for the next strike. Under a new moon dark, the 3 sat by the hedge stakes, dry grass whispering. The woman spun the silver dollar on the plank, eagle glinting. Stars catching the groove Hawthorne had scratched. He placed his hand over hers to still the coin, a silent vow to stand. Luca laid his smaller hand atop both, sealing the promise without a syllable. They slept outside that night, stars dense enough to make one believe in unseen constellations. Far off, thunder muttered. Dawn would come amber, full of choices, but for the span of those hours they belonged nowhere but to each other, hearts beating in imperfect synchrony under a shelterless sky, ready for whatever rose with dawn. Fireflies stitched slow sparks across the barley on the first still night in weeks. The woman watched their lantern glow overlap the porch light, thinking how small things learned to carry their own fire. Wind dropped, leaving the valley hushed and listening. Somewhere an owl floated, wing beats inaudible. Only the clean break of a vole's life told that it had passed. She felt the air tilt, as if the dark itself were leaning to overhear every heartbeat under the Mallister arch. Hawthorne stepped from the barn, shirt dark with forged sweat, carrying 3 iron stakes longer than her forearm. He had hammered them thin, flared the tips like arrowheads. He drove one at each corner of the yard, Luca holding the lantern low so shadows leapt. When the last stake sank true, Hawthorne tied a thin wire between them, threading sagebrush as cover. The woman understood. An early warning for hooves or boots that did not belong. He finished by hanging the dented harmonica on the wire's midpoint, so any jolt would shiver a note across night. Morning delivered a heat wave, so sudden it felt personal. The pump wheezed. Buckets of iron-tinged water grew harder to haul. They rationed the barrels, cut wash water to a ladle each, laid damp cloth on the mare's neck until her breathing slowed. The barley curled. Wheat stalks bleached before seed swollen. The woman pressed her palms to the soil, willing moisture upward. Dust flaked off like ash. Luca dragged sage branches to mulch roots, but the ground drank even shadow. Smoke pillars budded on the southern horizon, too many to be campfires. Refugees of drought, drifting northward toward the rumor of rain-fed fields. By dusk, figures appeared at the fence line. Families limping behind empty wagons, children with lips cracked white. Hawthorne carried buckets to the wire and poured water into battered pans until his arms shook. The mare's trough went dry that night, but cries at the fence settled into whispered blessings. The woman slept sitting against the porch post, cheek resting on the nailed silver coin, trusting Wood to keep vigil. 3 days later, riders unlike the hungry families arrived. 6 men, horses sleek, rifles clean. A lanky foreman read aloud a deed naming a cattle syndicate owner of every drop under Mallister soil. No court, no seal, just ink and a threat. The woman measured the men's eyes. None looked thirsty. Hawthorne folded the paper without comment, lit it at the forge coal, and let ash swirl into bright noon. The foreman promised a return with signatures that could burn flesh instead of parchment. That night lightning crawled along the mesa rims, but no rain followed, only dry thunder echoing like iron drums. The harmonica on the tripwire thrummed a single warning note, metal against metal. Hawthorne rolled from his blanket. Luca beside him with the first carved bird clutched in fists like a relic. Flames blossomed at the far corral, oil-soaked tumbleweed. The woman heaved a rain barrel and sent its last water hissing over the fire line. Sparks leapt to the roof. Hawthorne climbed the porch beam, pried the nailed dollar free, and used its rim like flint against a harmonica shell. Showering silver sparks on the soaked blankets, he shoved into burning eaves. Wood charred but did not catch. At dawn, black scars ringed the yard. The field stood untouched. Wind had blown embers the wrong way for the arsonists. The mare drank the last bucket. Luca's eyes tracked the sky for vultures but found only empty blue. The woman's voice, husky from smoke, counted remaining canteen rations. Enough for 3 days if they swallowed dust between sips. She cut the barley heads early, green and half-filled, and spread them on canvas to dry. Waste now would be hunger later. Mid-morning a lone rider appeared. A girl in trousers, hair braided tight, badge tucked into her belt. Sheriff's daughter, if rumors held true. She carried a folded telegram. The cattle syndicate had no legal deed. Even the ink forgery had been reported stolen. The girl had tracked the fake before fire spoke, louder than law. She offered no apology, only held out a skin of water for the mayor and another for Hawthorne. He drank, handed it to Luca, and let the last drops cool the boy's brow. The harmonica note on the wire trembled once, softer, as if exhaling. The sheriff's daughter stayed through twilight, mapping routes the syndicate riders favored, marking creeks where ambush risk bled thick. She laid her palm on the porch post, feeling the hole where the coin once sat. The woman slid the dollar into that hand, metal still warm from the roof fire, and closed the fingers around it. Payment for news, for warning, for one night of ease. After she rode out, Luca fetched spare mesh and nailed the porch window tight. Hawthorne forged 2 more stakes, this time twisting the heads into barbed spirals the woman recognized from vineyard walls in far territories. Living fences. They planted them beyond the tripwire, then pressed barley chaff around each base, whispering soil in place of prayer. That evening clouds finally split open. Rain struck the hot dirt in sheets, hissed like untamed steam. Barrels refilled in minutes, overflowing. Mud ran in joyful rivers down the rows, burying the seeds deeper, safer. The woman tilted her head, letting water trace the scars on her cheeks, as if erasing them one line at a time. Hawthorne stood with arms open, catching nothing, offering everything. Luca hooped, spinning until he collapsed laughing. When lightning flashed, the tripwire shimmered silver and the harmonica rang a pure, clear note. No warning this time. Music for the storm. Crop, soil, house, and hearts drank until the ground refused to take more. By dawn, sun climbed over a valley glistening green and gold. The mare stomped shallow puddles, mane tossing like a banner. The woman walked the rows, counting sprouts bold enough to breach overnight. Each tender leaf felt like a pulse under her fingertips. Hawthorne repaired the charred corral rail, every hammer blow sinking with her counts. Luca chased frogs between furrows, barefoot, laughing without caution. Smoke still coiled on the southern horizon, but voices carrying across the sage were softer now. Families finding creek bend swollen again, her own barrels left by the fence for them to share. She placed a carved bird with wings spread onto the porch beam, beside its folded wing twin. Past and present balanced, flight beginning. Night returned clear, heavy with cricket song. The woman took the harmonica from the wire, breathed a single long note that rose over field and cedar and settling ash. Hawthorne set the rawhide nameplate at the gate, letter by letter, until Hawthorne home, arched where Mallister once hung. Luca lit a lantern beneath, its glow pooling like promise. The moon hung half full, enough to show shapes, not enough to reveal the road's end. They stood together, 3 shadows on new soil, listening as far thunder rumbled meaningless threats. Rain barrels brimmed, stakes shone, barley lifted eager heads to the night breeze. Beyond the ridge hoofbeats echoed again, slower this time, cautious. The harmonica trembled against the woman's palm, poised between warning and welcome. She looked at Hawthorne, who nodded once, slow as dawn. They stepped forward, wire loosened, gate unlatched, not to surrender but to choose, for the first time, to meet whatever came, not as wanderers, but as keepers. Moonlight silvered the empty path beyond the gate, the night holding its breath for whatever would appear. A new silence settled, alert, fragile, humming like a wire drawn too tight. Inside the yard, barley whispered against itself. Barrels glinted brimful, and 3 figures stood poised where the rawhide arch now read Hawthorne home. Hoofbeats resolved from shadow, slow, deliberate, each step tasting the ground. First came the sheriff's daughter, hat brim low, rifle slung but pointed at nothing. Behind her rode families who had once begged water at the fence, now driving wagons stacked with seedlings, fence posts, pans for catching rain. Their torches bobbed like wandering stars. Last followed the lanky foreman, hands bound, led by 2 deputies. His eyes flicked from barricades to tripwire, to the hacked stumps of burned tumbleweed, reading the cost of his claim. The woman lifted the harmonica in greeting. Its one pure note hung over the yard, neither welcome nor warning. Simply truth carried on breath. Hawthorne opened the gate. Luca swung a lantern high, and the valley brightened as if dawn had risen early. The families entered first. Instead of pleading, they offered a sack of chickpea seed, 3 goats, a black iron kettle wide enough to feed 20. They spoke with voices cracked but steady. Word that wells to the south were salt now, her fields the only green for miles. Hawthorne listened, then pointed to the western paddock freshly cleared. Room waited there for tents, for goats, for broken things mended. Deputies dragged the foreman forward. The sheriff's daughter read judgment plain. Arson, armed menace, forged deeds. Yet the nearest court lay 100 miles, drought making laws slow as dust. The woman stepped closer, eyes flint-hard. She offered the foreman a tin cup brimming with water. He stared, half feral, yet drank because thirst outranks pride. When the cup emptied, she showed its dark interior. Her message clearer than any verdict. Water can save or scald, and the choice now sat in his own hands. Hawthorne cut the rope at the foreman's wrists, gave him 1 mule, 1 cracked barrel, and pointed east, toward sun and empty distances. The man swallowed, nodded once, and left without a word, leading his mule into the dark where nothing waited but the balance of his deeds. Cloud-filtered starlight softened, and work began. Families pitched canvas where Luca hammered stakes. Goats cropped weeds under the half-rebuilt fence, their bells chiming calm. Children carried sloshing pails to the barley rows, giggling whenever frogs leapt free. The woman moved between them, showing how to cup seedlings with damp earth, how to tap the barrel staves for leaks, how to listen to the hush between gusts, because that hush tells when rain is coming. Near midnight, the sheriff's daughter knelt by the tripwire, adjusting tension, so the harmonica would still sing but not shriek. She pressed a folded telegram into the woman's palm. The cattle syndicate had dissolved. Investors fled once water vanished. No one else would come with forged papers. The law would arrive slow yet sure to seal it. But for now the land stood unclaimed by any pen except sky-ridden rain. The woman walked the fence line alone at dawn's first blue, boots leaving shallow prints in fresh mud. She reached the porch, saw the burned eaves patched neat, the silver coin lying atop the post where she had set it after the fire. Beside it perched the 2 carved birds in Luca's third, a fledgling with wings just rising. She placed her palm over them, felt oak still warm from dream-held sun. Morning broke gold. Smoke from cook fires rose straight, not desperate. Goat milk steamed in the kettle. Hawthorne poured the first ladle for Luca, second for a child who had once called him river folk. Third he handed to the woman. Their fingers brushed, a current steadier than the pump flowed. He walked at a half-collapsed arch where Mallister's last letters tilted, pried them loose, and hammered each into a stake now anchoring the new hedge line. Old name returned to earth, feeding roots. He stepped back, eyes scanning valley. Green patchwork widening where barley, wheat, chickpea, sorghum now promised more than one table could hold. Heat climbed, but a breeze gathered from the western ridge. Clouds thickened, the kindly kind, dark-bellied with promise. The first drop struck the harmonica and rang a clear note that made every head lift. A second drop dimpled dust, then hundreds drummed roofs, barrels, upturned faces. Children shrieked, spinning. Luca pulled the sheriff's daughter into courtyard. They danced clumsy circles, rain pattering off hat brims like applause. The woman stood still, letting water trace new lines down cheeks once carved by salt. Hawthorne set a hand on her shoulder. No vow spoken, none needed. Around them seedlings flexed mud cooled. Fences drank, and a frail valley shifted toward enough. Night fell gentle. Fireflies returned, weaving sparks over wet barley. Settlers shared bread baked in the iron kettle, steam carrying rosemary and ash. The woman rose, harmonica in hand. She played 3 low notes, then spoke, voice steady, carrying farther than she thought possible. "Remember this sound," she said, "whenever thirst tries to own you." Hawthorne nodded, added a single log to the fire. Flames rose, illuminating the arch. Hawthorne home, letters glowing orange above doorways flung open. Barrels brimmed. Tripwire hummed soft lullaby. The valley's heartbeat slowed to match quiet rain against sage. And for the first time since he could recall, no one kept watch. Even guard dogs slept. If this story found a home in your heart, show it you care. Tap like, hit subscribe, and tell in the comments which moment held you longest by the throat. Your voice keeps these fires lit.